So Joseph is the favorite son of his father, and he's got two dreams, and he tells his brothers about the dreams, and they're jealous of him. They think he wants to rule over them. Maybe they're right, and that's why they hate him. And his dreams intensify the hate. And then later on, and then the story unfolds, and plot continues, and he ends up, his brothers sell him to a slave in Egypt. In Egypt, he ends up as a servant to one of the Pharaoh's ministers. Then he's accused of trying to rape the mistress. Then he's put in prison, and then the two ministers of Pharaoh have a dream, and Joseph interprets those dreams, and then he's got a track record of a dream interpreter, and therefore next parsha, when Pharaoh has his dreams, then they call Joseph. They remember Joseph, and Joseph interprets the dreams, and that's how he becomes the second in command of Egypt. So we have three series of dreams in a parsha, in sort of this parsha and the beginning of the next parsha. And the Torah speaks about the dreams in great length. Joseph's not so much, it just says the dreams, but you have the dreams of the ministers of the Pharaoh, great length. Pharaoh's dreams are great length. There's a lot about dreams over here. And what this Chassid, so there's a lot to talk about. The Chassidic commentary explains that the exile in Egypt is brought about through dreams, because that's really the fact that Joseph becomes the leader of Egypt is really the vehicle through which Jacob and his family moved to Egypt. So the entire exile is brought about through dreams, and there's a lot to say about the connection between the spiritual state of exile as a dream and a dream. The spiritual state of exile is a spiritual dream. And what is a dream? Is it good? Is it bad? Well, it's got a few dimensions, but that's another story. We're not going to get into that right now. What we're going to do today is we're going to think about the specifics of Jacob's dreams and see what are the lessons we could learn from the details within Joseph's dreams. So maybe the best place to start would simply be to open up the verse and then to read it inside, and then we can read the talk of the Rebbe on that dream. It's in English, so we'll share the screen when we get there. But for now, probably best to start with the actual dreams. So we will share the screen as usual. Comments, questions are welcome. Here we go. So this is beginning of the parsha, verse 3. Israel loved Joseph more than all of his sons. Who's Israel? Jacob. We read that last week. And he made for him a fine woolen coat. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers. So they hated him, and they could not speak with him peacefully. Joseph dreamt a dream and told his brothers, and they continued to hate him. And he said to them, listen now to this dream which I have dreamt. Behold, we are binding sheaves in the midst of the field. And behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves encircled it and prostrated themselves to my sheaf. So Joseph says, we're all binding sheaves of wheat in the field. I'm in the center. You surround me. You bow to me. The brothers were not very happy to hear that. Verse 8. So the brothers said to him, will you reign over us? Or will you govern us? Do you want to be our king? Hamalach, reign over us. Hamalach timloch, do you want to be king over us? Is the Hebrew. And they continued further to hate him on account of his dreams and on account of his words. Now we have another dream. And he again dreamt another dream, verse 9. And he again dreamt another dream. And he related it to his brothers. And he said, behold, I have dreamt another dream. And behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were prostrating themselves to me. So now it's not just the brothers. There's 11 stars, and there's the sun and the moon. He told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamt? Will we come, I, your mother and your brothers, to prostrate themselves to the ground? So his brothers envied him, but his father awaited the matter. In other words, they were jealous by a kanu. In Hebrew, it's envy. I don't know if envy is as strong as jealousy. I don't know. In any case, they were jealous. The aviv, and the father, Shamar Tadavar, he waited the matter, literally guarded, but it means waited. And obviously the father thought that Joseph would be worthy of being the leader. So that's the story. That's the story of the dreams. And now we want to think about the Hasidic commentary.
Rabbi,
Yes.
why would he have a dream about this and then tell his brothers, knowing that he was going to end up creating hostility?
Well, it depends how you read the story. Some people read the story that Joseph is immature and he's foolish, and he exactly did bring about the hostility from his brothers, right? If you look at the beginning of the parsha, I'm not sure. I don't remember if we read it. It's been a long time ago, like 3-4 minutes ago, so I can't remember if we actually read it. My short-term memory is shaky here, but
That's
no,
normal.
at my age, yeah, we didn't read it. These are the generations of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, being a shepherd, he was with his brothers with the flock, and he was a lad. Who na'ar? How old was he? He was 17 years old. The verse highlights that he was a na'ar. Na'ar means a lad, a young boy. Wasn't so young, he was 17. Rashi explains that the commentaries say it means he was immature. So that's one way to.
I'm sorry to interrupt. A nar in Yiddish, at least, is like a foolish.
Yeah. Yes. In Yiddish, a nar is a fool, but that's a different word. Maybe they're related. It's spelled differently. Yeah. That's yeah. It could be the Yiddish comes from the Hebrew. I don't know. German. I don't know how you say fool in German. I don't know. So the short answer is I don't know. But yes, it sounds exactly the same. Even though when we spell Yiddish in Hebrew words, with Hebrew letters, we would write nar as nun aleph resh. This is nun ayin resh, but of course that's not a sign for anything, because Yiddish grammar, Yiddish words is really German words. So the Hebrew spelling is not that indicative.
Hmm.
In any case, the short answer is he's immature. So that's the answer to Dr. Ken. He was immature. But there are more reasons, and basically saying that part of this is to justify the hate, because we have a problem here. We also have the brothers hate him so much. Maybe it could be justified. Maybe he was maybe not only did the father favor him, but he was also flaunting those advantages. So maybe that was a problem. Now so in other words, put some of the blame on Joseph. That would be some interpretations. There are other interpretations that are actually a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? More seeking to justify Joseph, and they say as follows. It's based on a Talmudic principle that is actually spelled out in Tractate Brachot. In the first tractate of the Talmud, there's a lot about dreams. I don't know how they got business. It's a lot of dreams there, and the Talmudic principle about dreams is: I had a dream. What does it mean? So what they say in the Talmud is the dream is it's not really like an objective science. The dream is about how you interpret the dream. And if the dream is interpreted as positive, it can be positive. If the dream is interpreted as negative, it can be negative. So some people say Joseph goes to his brothers and says, I have a dream. Please interpret it for me in a proper way. What am I to do with this dream that I had? Now, the brothers could have interpreted it differently. And instead, they say, we think you want to rule. So it must mean that you want to rule over us. Okay? You want to be our king. And in that sense, it's a straightforward interpretation, because bowing is a straightforward interpretation. But in that sense, it's all negative. But there are alternative interpretations. So, for example, they say, you want to rule, you want to be our king. Hamaloch timloch aleinu. You want to be our king. It must be you want to be our king. So there's a way to look at the story and say, who is the king of who? Let's say you know the story, right? You know the end of the story. What's the end of the story? The end of the story is Joseph becomes the king of Egypt, and all the brothers bow to him, and he sustains the family, and they all come to Egypt. So you know the end of the story, so it makes sense. Yeah, the brothers will say that you want to be our king. But there's one way to look at it and say, Joseph is not the king. Joseph is the servant. Joseph was the one for 22 years, had to be away from his family. He was sold as a slave. He was put in prison. Even when he rose to power, he was busy, full-time job. He had no time for Thanksgiving vacations. He was full-time job running the Egyptian economy. When the brothers come, he's supporting them. Now, that's not the typical model of a monarch in the ancient world. And the monarch In the ancient world, the monarch is the one who the simple people work for. Here, it's almost the opposite. Joseph is working on behalf of the brothers. So in some ways, they misinterpret the bowing. They look at the bowing and say, "Oh, Joseph, you're so bad. You want to rule over us." And he's like, "No, you bow to me." There would be an alternative interpretation, means you bow to Joseph. The brothers bowing to Joseph means that the brothers need Joseph. They're going to receive something from Joseph, as they have. But it doesn't have to mean that you're going to rule and reign over us, because that never really happened, right? Joseph didn't what's the word I'm looking for? Did not exert his authority over his brothers. He didn't dominate them. To the contrary, he served them, right? So here you see how the same set of facts could be interpreted in two ways, positive or negative to the brothers. The brothers run for the negative interpretation. So according to this interpretation, when Joseph tells his brothers, "Here is my dream," he's not saying, "Here is my dream, and I want you to understand that you better stop bowing to me now." He's giving them the dream, and he says, "Tell me what to make sense of this. How could I interpret the dream?" And he's actually giving them the power to interpret the dream. So that is two ways to look at it.
But
So
why they interpreted it that way? Because they already sensed that he had exclusive role in the family. That's why they interpret it.
Right. So usually what we project on other people, what our fears are. Right. When I don't like you, it's not so much you, it's what I think you are. Right. So it's really a reflection of myself. Right. We talked about this in Parshas Noach. The Baal Shem Tov said that many times when you look at somebody else, it's really a mirror of yourself. So when I fear somebody, when I am threatened by somebody, not always, but sometimes it's not really that person. Sometimes it's what I project on that person, as which is really a reflection of myself. There's a funny joke. It's not funny, but there's a joke that once upon a time a guy says, "I need to borrow milk from my friend," or whatever it was, $1, $5, whatever it was, and he's thinking to himself, and he says, "My friend doesn't like me. He's never going to give it to me, but I really need it." So he goes out of the house, takes a few steps. He turns around. That's not going to happen. My friend's not going to give it to me. Long story short, he goes back and forth. Finally, he knocks on the door, and the friend opens up the door and he says, "You know what? I don't need your money." And he walks away. He never asked for the money, but in his mind, he's got all that built up ideas that the friend was going to reject him. So he walks away. So that is what happens here. Very often, when we're nervous about something, a lot of times it's not objective, it's subjective. We're projecting on the other person. Okay, fine. That is a little bit of background about the story. Now we want to look at the Hasidic interpretation. There are 2 points that I want that the talk is a little bit longer. There are 2 points. I don't want to say which one I like better. I like the second one better. Don't tell anybody. But I guess we'll start from the first and we'll see how far we can go. Okay, you want to get to Vayeshev. Okay. So this is the talk translated into Hebrew. I'll give a little introduction just to say by heart what the first paragraph is going to say, and then we'll read it inside. We have a problem here, not a problem. We have a problem. It's not a problem. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and Joseph says as follows: Pharaoh, you know why you had the dream twice? You had the same dream twice. He has 2 dreams. Joseph says it's the same theme. Both dreams are the same theme. You know why you had it twice? Because whenever you have a dream twice, it means that it's going to happen very quickly. God is going to make this happen quickly, immediately. In other words, we're starting right away. Right? He gave the interpretation of Joseph's dream. A Pharaoh's dream was that there's going to be 7 years of famine and 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. But it's starting right away. The clock is ticking. Why? Because if you have a dream twice is emphasis, and emphasis is speed. That's what Joseph tells Pharaoh. Now, Joseph's dreams, there are also 2 dreams. But Joseph's dreams did not happen right away. It took many years till they happened. Right? Joseph was away at least for, I think it was 12 years, 13 years, I think it was. And before the dreams came true, before he rose to power. And before the brothers bowed to him, that probably was 20 years. That was 20 years before the brothers bowed to him. So the fulfillment of the dreams are more than 20 years away. So if this fulfillment of the years of the dreams are more than 20 years away, why does it say that you have that it's why were there two dreams? So the answer must be that they're not the same dream. If it's not the same dream, okay, now you don't have to have, now it's not, now it doesn't mean that God will happen, that will happen immediately, because that's only if you have two dreams that are the same, but it's not the same dream. There are many interpretations why the dreams are different. One interpretation from the Malbim, from the Barbanel, which I really like, so I'll say it, I don't think it ever says it, is that the two dreams are referring to two separate periods. The first dream was, remember you read, that Joseph says we're standing in the field and everyone has a sheaf of wheat, and the sheaves of wheat bow down to my sheaf of wheat, not to me, but to my bundle of wheat. The second dream, there are 11 stars, sun and moon bowing to me, not to my star, but to me. So that Barbanel says it's two stories. One story is when the brothers come to purchase grain. They have no idea who Joseph is. They're not bowing to him because he's Joseph. They're bowing to him because he's got the wheat. So that's one event. That's one episode before he revealed his identity. And then there's a separate episode that once Joseph revealed his identity, now they bow to him, not to his sheaf of wheat, not to his star, but to him. So that just indicates that it's two separate stories. If it's two separate stories, talking about two separate events, it doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately. So that's a conventional interpretation. Now we'll see what the Rebbe says a little bit different. Here we go. The journey begins. This all was introduction, 22 minutes of introduction. Wonderful. The Torah relates Yosef's two dreams shortly after the beginning of Parshas Vayeshev. Both dreams foretell that Yosef would be granted dominion over his brothers, and they would bow down to him. The second dream has only one addition. Not only would the 11 stars, Yosef's brothers, bow to him, but also the sun and the moon, his mother and father. Problem is his mother already passed away. Rachel died young. So we're now interpreting this to mean not Rachel, but his stepmother, Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant. So Yaakov and Bilhah. Okay. Later in Parshat Miketz, next week's Parsha, the Torah relates that Pharaoh also had two dreams. In that instance, as well, both dreams had the same meaning. With regard to Pharaoh's dreams, however, the Torah tells us that they were repeated to show that the events alluded to were imminent. But here, like we said, it's not imminent. So let's see what's going on here. The Torah does not give an explanation regarding the repetition of Yosef's dreams. The second dream's addition, that Yaakov and Bilhah would also bow to Yosef, is not significant enough to warrant the dream's repetition. Indeed, these additional details could have been alluded to in the first dream. The Rebbe is saying, well, you need a second dream to tell me that the father and mother will also bow. Put the father and mother in the first dream and you're done. As such, the implication is that the two dreams, although sharing the same general meaning, reflect two different concepts. And that's the principle that I said earlier. Okay. We must thus endeavor to understand the significance of these two dreams and the lesson they hold for us. For the deeds of the patriarchs are assigned to their descendants. We said this many times. When we study these talks, it comes from the Medrash, quoted by Nachmanides many times. All the stories of the patriarchs are a sign. They're a teaching for their descendants. So the stories of Joseph are stories of Joseph's dreams. The repetition of Joseph's dreams all have to be a lesson for us. That's the premise. Although Joseph is not considered one of the patriarchs, the events that occurred to him relate to us all because his divine service was a direct expansion of Yaakov's. As implied by the verse, these are the offsprings of Yaakov, Yosef. In other words, the Torah, it's a very interesting phenomenon in the beginning of this parsha. So I'm going to open the beginning of the parsha. Eila Tolos Yaakov. These are the generations of Jacob. These are the stories of Jacob. Joseph was 17 years old. Joseph, what about the other descendants? Literally, generations is descendants. Why does it say these are the descendants of Jacob? Joseph, say he had 11 sons. Repeat it. No. So what this means is that in some sense, Joseph is closer to his father than all other brothers. In other words, Jacob is let's see how he words it here. The divine service of Joseph was a direct extension of the divine service of Jacob. As implied by the verse, these are the offsprings of Yaakov, Yosef. It is Yosef who drew down Yaakov's spiritual influence into the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, and into our material world. So what's the Kabbalistic allusion here? We say there are four spiritual worlds. The patriarchs, the patriarchs live in the state of mind of the highest world. In other words, they operate in the highest world. They have the awareness of the highest world of Atzilut. Their children are not in the highest world, they're on a lower level, the three lower worlds. But Joseph is the one who, Kabbalistically, he's the one who can express his father's awareness within the lower worlds. That's the Kabbalistic idea. In any case, back to us, we know there are two dreams of Joseph. We know that their interpretation did not happen immediately, so it must be that there are two different dreams, and we have to get to what are the difference of the two different dreams, and what are the two difference, and what are the difference between the two, what is the difference between the two dreams, and also more significantly, what's the lesson for us? So now we have a very interesting detour. And the detour is as follows. What we're going to do here is we're going to compare and contrast Jacob's dreams to Pharaoh's dreams. And the point that we're going to highlight is if you look at Joseph's dreams, it begins with something more physical, more grounded, more earthly, and then it continues to something more spiritual. In other words, the beginning, the first dream is the sheaves of grain on the earth. And the second dream is the stars and the sun and the moon. So we're going from earth to heaven. We're going upward. Compare that to Pharaoh's dreams. So what happened in Pharaoh's dreams? The first dream is that you have 7 cows, 7 healthy cows, and 7 skinny cows. And the skinny cows swallow the fat cows. That was the first dream, meaning the years of famine are going to swallow up the sustenance of the years of plenty. That was his first dream. His second dream was the same theme. There were 7 healthy ears of grain and 7 ears of grain that were totally beaten up by the wind. And the bad ears of grain swallow the good ears of grain. Okay, what's the pattern? You're going from the animal kingdom to the vegetable kingdom. That's a step down. That's a lower form of life, going from animal to vegetation. So what you see here, the contrast between Joseph's dreams and Pharaoh's dreams, is that in regards to Joseph's dreams, we're going up, we're going higher from earth to heaven. Whereas Pharaoh's dreams, and here Pharaoh represents the unholiness, Pharaoh goes from the more advanced form of life to the more simple, to the lesser form of life, and we're going to see what that means for us. So that is just a comparing and contrasting these two groups of dreams, the beginning of our parsha and the beginning of the next parsha. So let's see if we can read this inside. The difference between Joseph's two dreams can be explained as follows. The first concerned material objects. He and his brothers were binding sheaves in the field. The second dream involved objects in the heavenly sphere, the sun, moon, and stars. So that's what Joseph. He starts with earth, material, and then goes to heavenly sphere, suns and moons and stars. Pharaoh's dreams, by contrast, both concern worldly matters. One focused on cows, the animal kingdom, and the other on ears of grain, plants. Pharaoh did not dream of heavenly realm at all. This is fascinating, right? Pharaoh is not concerned with the heavens. He's not thinking about the heavens. His attention is drawn downward. I think there's a medrash that says that the reason why a human being walks on 2 feet, whereas animals work on 4, is an animal doesn't see the heaven. What is an animal concerned with? An animal is concerned with the earth. What's for lunch? That's the animal. The human being has the capacity to lift up his eyes heavenward. And lifting up your eyes heavenward all of a sudden changes your entire perspective. You see, well, it's not all about me and what I'm eating for lunch. There's vast expanses, and it starts making the person curious of what's above me and what's the source of everything. But if I'm looking down on the earth the entire time, I'm not going to raise my head upward to see the spiritual ideas. So here it's fascinating. First of all, Pharaoh is not thinking about heaven. Joseph is thinking about the heaven. He starts from earth and goes to heaven. He's thinking about heaven. Pharaoh is not really interested in heaven at all. So that's the first point. The second point is, moreover, even with regard to worldly matters, his dreams followed a downward trend. First, he dreamt about the cows, and afterward about the ears of grain. Joseph, by contrast, follow the pattern, always ascend higher with regard to holy matters. The principle of we always increase in holiness, which is, of course, why when we light the Hanukkah menorah, there's a debate between Shammai and Hillel. How many candles do you light? Shammai says the first night you light 8 and then you decrease. That's a whole nother discussion of why he says that. But in any case, Hillel says every day you increase 1 candle. Why? Says the Talmud. He quotes this principle because in holiness you want to increase. So Joseph is increasing his upward trend from grain to the heavens. But Pharaoh is the opposite. Pharaoh's going on a downward trend. First, he dreamt about the cows, and afterwards about the ears of grain. Joseph, by contrast, follows the pattern, always ascend higher with regard to holy matters. Thus, he first dreamt about material matters, then about heavenly matters, the sun, moon, and stars. So what's the lesson for us? A general lesson. The general lesson is the first thing we have to do is we have to be aware of the heaven. And we have a little story here about the Soviets trying to intimidate the previous Rebbe. Okay, this indicates a broader difference between Jews and non-Jews. Even while a Jew is involved with material concerns, he lives on 2 planes simultaneously. Not only is he involved with this physical world, but he shares a connection to the spiritual truth of the world to come. In other words, we're going to elaborate upon this point in the next section, that a Jew could live on 2 planes at once. Pharaoh is in the physical world, he's not thinking about heaven. A Jew could be in the physical world and be in heaven simultaneously, but we're going to get to that later. Now we have a story. My revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, once expressed this concept as follows. When he was arrested in 1927, one of the Russian interrogators threatened him with a revolver. The Rebbe responded, those who have many gods and one world are frightened by such an item. A person who has one God and 2 worlds has nothing whatsoever to be afraid of. The Rebbe was not speaking of living first in this world and then in the world to come. Instead, he meant that even while living in this material world, a Jew shares a connection with the loftier spiritual realm. This connection follows a pattern of ascent. As alluded to in the verse, a ladder was erected on the earth, and its top reached into the heavens. The ladder of a Jew's divine service has its base in lowly material concerns, yet it reaches into the heavens to the highest spiritual planes. So we're going to elaborate upon this point in the next section. But what do we have so far? We have so far is we're looking at the contrast between Joseph's dreams and Pharaoh's dreams. And this tells us about the state of mind of Joseph versus the state of mind of Pharaoh, who's the superpower of the time, the leader of the pyramid, on top of the superpower of the time. So Pharaoh, number 1, he's concerned only with physical. Spirituality is not important for him. Number 2, within physical, he's not growing. So he becomes more and more invested in materialism and is being drawn down from, even within materialism, the metaphor is he keeps becoming more materialistic. And it's expressed in the dreams from cows to ears of grain, from the living kingdom, the animal kingdom, to the vegetable kingdom. With Joseph, first of all, he keeps growing. And number 2, he can always be, he's thinking about the heaven. And that's what we're going to elaborate upon in a minute. And we're going to see part of the message here of the exile. Part of the message of the dreams is that you could be both, in both planes simultaneous. And that's, of course, the message for us, that we live in the physical world. But when we live in the physical world, we're not exclusive in the physical world. When we are invested in the physical world, we can retain our attention and connection to spirituality. And that's the message of Joseph, and that's the lesson in our life.
Rabbi, could you put the link to the page you're using in the chat?
Yes. So I make it bigger because I want to see everybody. That's why I close it. Okay, let's find the link in the chat. Here you go.
Thank you.
Rabbi, is that, I have a question. Is it connected that once you start looking up to the spiritual, you kind of become more,
I think you're right.
more and more involved with the physical? You don't And how if that can be changed, if you're going to explain it later, then just disregard.
No, I don't know if it's going to appear later. I didn't read the talk so carefully yet, but I think that you're right that those two concepts are interconnected. If you're not looking upward, ultimately you fall down. There's a interesting medrash based on a verse in the Psalms. The Psalm says, I forget which Psalm, maybe 14 or 15 or 16, one of those. It says, Mi ya'aleh b'har Hashem, who will climb the mountain of God? And it means who will come onto the temple mountain, but it also means figuratively, who will become close to God. And there's a whole list of requirements. Niki kapayim, you have to have clean hands, meaning to say you can't do anything wrong. Ubar levav, you have to have a pure heart. So there's requirements of who can come to the mountain of God, which is a metaphor for coming close to God. So the Medrash says like this, and the Hasidic commentary elaborates upon this. Why the metaphor of a mountain? You say the palace of God, say the home of God. What's the mountain? So the Medrash says like this: when you climb a mountain, you can't, very hard to be stationary. If you're not going up, you're going down. So he says the same thing is with the service of God and with the quest of escaping the pull of the gravitational pull of materialism. If you're not going upward, you're going to go downward. And that I think is what Vicky is saying, that if you're not looking at heavenward, then you're going to keep going down. Down doesn't mean, that means becoming more materialistic. That's all. That's what it means. That we're not talking about evil yet. We're talking about materialistic as opposed to spiritual. And it's an effort to keep your head upward, look upward. If you don't look upward, you're looking downward. Okay, so there's a downward trend because there's a gravity to the earth. In other words, we're materialistic people, so we're going to be drawn to materialism. We're also spiritual people. We have a soul, but for that we have to allow it to breathe. We have to give it oxygen. We have to let it to express itself. We have to allow it to expand. In other words, we have to look upward. We have to dream about the stars. But if you're dreaming about the cows, you're going to end up dreaming about the ears of grain. Okay, we continue. I really like the second piece. If I remember correctly, I like the second piece. So we'll do that, and then we'll take a break till next week. Okay. Okay, let's read it. The Torah's narrative are all precise in detail, each providing us with a directive in our divine service. Accordingly, the fact that Yosef had two dreams, one concerning material matters and another concerning heavenly matters, bearing the same message, serves as a lesson for every Jew. What do we have so far? We have two dreams. Joseph has two dreams. The brothers are going to bow to him. So why do I need two dreams to say the same point? Oh, here is the message. Teaching him to fuse both his worlds, the material and the spiritual, into a single entity. Not only should a Jew's material concerns not hinder his divine service, they should complement it until ultimately the material world becomes one with the spiritual. This is revolutionary. This is very Hasidic. So I'm happy we're reading this on the 20th of Kislev, which is a continuation of the holiday of the 19th of Kislev, the new year of Hasidism. The history is that Rabbi Shneur Zalman was freed from prison on the 19th of Kislev toward the afternoon, but then instead of going home to his Chassid, his followers' home, he was sent to the home by mistake. He got into a home of someone who opposes the Hasidic movement, and there he was, the guy was very respectful. He was a Jew. He was very respectful. He invited him in. He gave him tea. But then he started screaming at him about why you're changing Judaism. And he was there for an hour or two. And it was great pain for him to see the opposition to the Hasidic movement. And finally, the Hasidim realized something is wrong because they were expecting their leader. And he wasn't nowhere to be found. And they figured out what happened. They came to the other apartment in that same building where Rabbi Shneur Zalman was held, and they brought him to a home with the followers. So that's why the 20th one is really, Rabbi Shneur Zalman said that the 2 hours in the home of the Jew who opposed Hasidism was more painful than the 53 days in prison. Okay, so we celebrate both. So this is also the new year of Hasidism. So what is one of the big ideas of Hasidism? So you'll see later that the Kabbalah says that the physical and the spiritual could be a conflict. And that was last week's parsha, a few weeks ago's parsha, when we had Rebecca's dream. Rebecca's dream, she was told that you have two sons in your womb, and they're always going to be battling each other. When one rises, the other one will fall. And the Zohar says it's not just Jacob and Esav, it's materialism and spirituality. If the more materialism one has in their life, the more weakened the spirit is, and vice versa. The more spirit you have, the more weakened your body is going to be, or your physical material world is going to be. And that's one state of mind. But the Hasidic movement says, no, that's only if your materialism is a distraction from holiness. But the point of Judaism ultimately is to bridge the physical and the spiritual, and the physical will enhance the spiritual. In our story, we have two dreams, a dream about the earth and a dream about the heavens. And both those stories are saying the same point. So why do you have to say it twice? Because what we're trying to say is both planes, both the physical and the spiritual, have the same theme. Because the purpose of my physical life and my spiritual life is one and the same. The physical possessions that I have and the spiritual comfort and the spiritual wealth the physical possessions and the physical comfort and the physical life is here to enhance my spiritual entity. It's not a conflict. So that is a beautiful message. Now let's read the Zohar. What does the Zohar says? Says the Rebbe as follows. Although the Zohar states the strength of the body is the weakness of the soul, this does not contradict the above. The Zohar is referring not to the body's physical health, but to the strength of its desires and the fervor of its longing for material things. By contrast, preserving the body's physical health is a necessity. As Rambam writes, maintaining a healthy and sound body is among the paths of God, enabling one to know and serve God. In other words, the healthier you are, the easier it is to understand God. In other words, the body could complement the soul. And that's the lesson. Now we have a cute story, and we'll conclude the story. To explain this concept that all material concerns, eating, drinking, and our other activities should be carried out for a spiritual purpose, to serve God, is inherent to the makeup of every Jew, even simple people, as reflected by the following well-known story. So we have the story, but before we get to the story, what is the lesson? The lesson is, why do we have two dreams? And both those dreams are saying the same point. And yet, they are two things, one about the physical earth, binding sheaves, and one about the heaven, because the message is that a Jew operates in two planes, the physical and the spiritual, and he operates on both those planes simultaneously because both those planes complement each other. The physical complements the spiritual. And here we have a story about the children of the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash was the third Chabad Rebbe. He had two sons. He had a few sons, but the story is about the Rabbi Shalom Ber, who became the fifth Chabad Rebbe, and his older brother, the Razar of Zalman Aaron. So here we have a story. When they were young, the Rebbe Rashab and his brother of Zalman Aaron were arguing about the difference between Jews and non-Jews. To provide an answer, their father, the Rebbe Maharash, summoned his attendant, Ben Sion, a simple Jew with little Torah scholarship. Ben Sion, did you eat today? The Rebbe asked him. Yes. Did you eat well? What do you mean well? Thank God I'm satisfied. Why do you eat? In order to live. And why do you live? To be a Jew and to do what God wants. The attendant answers, sighing slightly. Afterwards, the Rebbe Maharash told his children, do you see? A Jew's nature is to eat in order to live. And he lives in order to be a Jew and to do what God wants. He even sighs because he feels that he has not yet lived. He has yet to live by these values according to the truly objective standard. In other words, he's not fully on that level. So in other words, here we have a story. Why does the Jew live? Why does the Jew eat? A Jew eats to live. Why do you live? To serve God. In other words, your physical body and your physical needs are a vehicle for spirituality. It's not a conflict. Moreover, since a Jew desires and intends that all his material concerns be connected with the spiritual, they are indeed considered as such. As the Baal Shem Tov says, wherever a person's desire is, there he himself is to be found. Beautiful interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says, how do you define where I am? Where am I? Am I where I am? No, I am where I want to be. So if when you're involved in the physical world, what you want is the spirituality of that concept, then you are indeed in heaven, even while you are binding sheaves on earth. So these are two of the lessons that we offer so far. Number one is you have to constantly grow. Unlike Pharaoh, who goes from the spiritual, from the physical, but even within the physical realm, he's going from the plane of the animal kingdom going to the vegetation, going downward. The Jew goes upward from vegetation, from the grain to heaven. That's one difference. That's one lesson. And the other lesson is that we have to be in both planes at the same time. We're living the two dreams at once. Even when we're invested in the physical world, we're living a spiritual life, because the purpose of why we want to live in a physical way and why we want to amass physical blessings is not for its own sake, but it's for a spiritual purpose.
But do we have time for questions?
Yes, yes. I think we'll stop here because there's more lessons, but I think we'll stop here for now. And comments, questions are, of course, welcome. But I think we'll stop here for now. You have the link if you want to finish the talk. It's relatively straightforward. Go ahead, Vicky.
I have a couple of questions. The first question is about the Jew. Is it because of the Jewish soul and the nature of Jewish soul to live, to eat in order to live, or this is just for education? And the second question is there a link between those two interpretations? Because if you don't look upwards, then you cannot fuse the two.
Right. So I think that the first question, I think it would be both. In other words, there's something about the culture also, right? It was really telling about the culture of the time. It's not in the book. Maybe it's not politically correct. It's not in the book, but in the original story, it's that he called his non-Jewish attendants and he said, how's your day? Did you eat? Yeah, I ate. Why did you eat? To live. Why do you live? So I can go and have some schnapps and eat herring. Okay, so it's a statement of the culture. In other words, why am I alive? I'm alive for pleasure. Verse, I'm alive to serve God, right? So part of it is culture, because of course a non-Jew can also, of course, dedicate his life to elevating the world and becoming more spiritual. There's no question about that. So I think it's when you say non-Jew here, we mean the culture, certainly the culture of the time. Your second point, are they related? The thesis would be as follows. Your idea would be that if you are heavenward, you can connect both worlds. Yeah, I think that would make sense.
You can't, by definition, you can't.
Yeah, if you're the Pharaoh who's not looking to the heaven, right? Think about the animal who's not dreaming about heaven. All he's dreaming about is the grass because you're looking downward. So we're not even at first base. Right? You can't connect both worlds if you don't have both worlds. Then once we said the first chapter of the talk, which is you should know that a Jew could live in two planes. No, I'm sorry. A Jew understands that you don't get stuck in the physical. You would say beyond the physical, there's also a spiritual world. That's step one. Be aware that there's the grain and then there's the heavens. And just because I'm invested in the grain doesn't mean there's no heavens. There's a funny Hasidic story. Okay, like all Hasidic stories, it's light on plots, but high on meaning. So the story is that two scholars are sitting in the field, are sitting on the horse and wagon, and they're driving, and they're talking about angels. So someone says, well, how do you know the angels exist? So they say as follows. That's the end of the plot, by the way. So they say as follows. Let's analyze the scene. So the scene is everybody has an agenda. You have the horses. Why are the horses walking or running? Because they know that when they get to the inn, they're going to get grain. They're going to get not grain. What do they get? They get straw. Why is the wagon driver riding? Because he knows that when he gets to the destination, he's going to get a paycheck. Why do the scholars going? Because when they get there, they're going to sit and talk about the angels. They're going to talk. They have a conference about spirit. They have a conference of ideas. That's the story. So then the conclusion is just because the horse is thinking about the grain, that's why the angels are not angels. In other words, every person, every character in this story has their own frame of reference. And for one person, I just know about the horse. I just know grain. I'm running for the grain. The wagon driver says, I want my paycheck. That's what I want. The scholar has his own agenda why they're going. So in other words, if you're not going to lift up your eyes, if you're not going to be open to a reality beyond your own, you're not getting out to first base. You're not going to see that. You're not going to dream of stars if you're looking downward, if you're thinking about the grain. Now we get that. So that's the first level. And we should all be on that level, right? That we're aware, not just of our physical needs, but also of our spiritual needs. The soul wants to connect to God. That's the stars. That's heavenly bodies, which is a metaphor for things that are less physical and closer to God. Now, once we get there and we think, oh, we're wonderful. I got my physical, I can eat my breakfast, and I can go to study Torah. It's wonderful. I got two parts of my life. Then we get to the second part of the talk. The second part says it's not enough to have both the physical and the spiritual, right? Because then why do you need two dreams? In other words, what's the idea that you have two dreams and they both say the same thing? Oh, the deeper way to live is that you can be in both places simultaneously. In other words, Joseph is in the field, and when he's in the field binding sheaves, he's thinking about the stars. That's the deeper interpretation, and ultimately that's the ultimate, because the ultimate is to connect the physical and the spiritual. So that's the whole purpose of creation. Like Isaiah says, that when Mashiach comes, all flesh will see that the word of mouth spoke, or the word of God spoke. In other words, all flesh will see this divine spirit and divine spark within every creation. Because every creation is now reconnected to its source and put in the context of what its purpose is. And what's the purpose of the physical? To serve the spiritual, to enhance the spiritual. So now I can be in both places at once. I'm going to work. I'm running errands. I'm taking care of my body. I am creating a healthy body. I'm exercising, whatever. That was the example of the Zohar. Whatever it's going to be that I'm doing, at that same point, I'm in the spiritual plane because I have my mind on the heaven, but also the purpose of the physical would be to serve the spiritual.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And enjoy your day. This has been a lot of fun. So thank you. And we'll see each other in good health, God willing. And as is our custom, we're in business Thanksgiving morning. We do that every year. Everyone says, what? We have a Torah class on Thanksgiving. And every year when they make the calendar, I get calls and texts and messages. What? You're leaving the Torah class on Thanksgiving? How could that be? Well, we're very thankful to be able to study Torah on Thanksgiving, even if only a few people can come, even if I'm myself, a Jew is never alone. God is always with us. So you can always start to study Torah. So we'll be here, God willing, on Thanksgiving, being very thankful for the opportunity to study Torah and together. So I hope to see you if you could join. If not, have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and you should have many, many things in your life to be thankful for.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, you too, and your family.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.